I'm Sherry Bagley. I'm the Executive Director of the Association for Experiential Education, and we are here tonight to celebrate the launching of our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Field Guide, which has been an amazing process of so many incredible people coming together to make this happen. So tonight is a celebration of that and just a way to celebrate Dr. Nina Roberts' life and her commitment and her great and awesome journey for social justice. So thank you all for being here. We are looking forward to hearing from some of our authors. We're going to hear from a few of our editors and the process and how that happened. And we're going to hear from Sky Gray, who helped really move this project forward. She was very close with Dr. Nina and really worked toward making this project a reality. So that's a bit of our agenda. Please be mindful and keep yourself on mute. We love to see everybody's faces. It's great to have everybody visible. That's awesome. We understand if you can't have your camera on too, but please stay muted while people are talking. And also just be mindful, this is, we want to create a safe space tonight for everyone. These are reflection papers that people have written, their lived experiences, and some of the information they are sharing is highly personal and may be triggering for the author or others or for yourself. So please be mindful and kind and respectful tonight. Great. We are again very lucky to have Sky Gray here. She is going to start us off with some information about how this project came into being. Sky?
All right, so thank you, Sherry, and thank you to everyone who has joined us today, because today is an incredibly important, special, and actually inspiring day, despite that we've lost Nina on the face of the earth. Her spirit continues and her legacy continues. And I just want to share with you a little bit about the evolution of this project. And so I was going through my files, getting ready for this launch of the book, and I hearkened upon an email where Nina and I were talking with a guy named Simon Whitmore from Routledge Publishing Company. And the idea early on was to create a textbook that would have a lot of social justice theory, practice, and models to help staff, not only in an academic setting, but also in a field setting. And so we wanted it to be applicable across multiple disciplines, but primarily working and focusing on Nina's expertise and love for the issues around social justice in outdoor spaces. And Routledge was very receptive to those ideas and they wanted to move forward, but unfortunately, as we were refining our concepts of that book, Nina's health began to become more increasingly challenged, and her energy waned. And despite that waning, and despite some of the challenges that the cancer journey created for Nina, she did not want to let this project go. And she was determined to figure out a way to pivot and come up with something that is equally compelling as perhaps even or more so than a textbook. So she was at my house for Thanksgiving in 2021, the Thanksgiving before she passed away. And I said, okay, Nina, we need to fall back and regroup. And she's like, that's right. We're going to keep it tight and we're going to figure this out. And she picked up this book in my office. She called my home, her country home. I called her home, my city home. And we started to look through the Outward Bounds reading book. And I said, hey, what if we were to do some kind of field guide? And she's like, yes. So she picked this up, she's flipping through it, and she comes to the poem Bits and Pieces. And she reads that poem, and we have this incredible conversation afterwards. And I actually shared that video in a workshop that we did, that Christine and I did for AEE, when she read that poem and what it meant to her and the bits and pieces of her life and the bits and pieces of what she wanted to do with creating this field guide, right? So from there, we were able to distill that it was going to be a field guide. And another element came in that really helped us refine the vision of this project. And that was because Nina was supposed to do an Activate talk for AEE. And she was super excited about it. She was working on her notes. She had already actually started practicing with me. I was at her house 2 weeks before she ended up going into the into the hospital, and Alyssa was there. And I hope, Alyssa, you're on this Zoom. I'm thinking about you. I'm sending you so much love.
Thank you. I am, Sky. Thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah, I feel better just already. So we started talking about it. Alyssa was there, and we're making a list of who's going to be involved in the project, and how does Activate fit into that. And then Christine Norton's name came up because she was going to be Nina's Activate coach. And so then we started talking about the power of story, and Christine brought in this whole piece around, what about bringing in reflection papers? And so it so happened to be that Christine was doing a training for us here at Valley of the Moon and Sonoma County Human Services. And we were able to be together with Nina while she was in the hospital. It was myself, Christine, and Sarita and I have a recording of that. I have actually a lot of recordings of our meetings and our time together, and asking her for guidance and her sage wisdom. And during that sacred time that we had held together, Nina looked at all of us in our eyes and she said, "You've got to carry my torch forward. This publication has to bring in the people you need to bring into, but we cannot drop the ball on this because there's too many important concepts that the field is still struggling with. And we got to help the practitioners. We got to help the administrators. So this book is designed it could be on a board. It could be on a boardroom's desk. It could be in your backpack. It could be in a residential shelter, like the one that I run. It could be anywhere, because the stories cross disciplines and they cross the challenges that so many people face in this field around social justice and equality, and determinants that really create safe spaces of belonging and inclusion. So that's a little bit of the story. So then fast forward, we gathered our troops and we created our team, and we were able to galvanize all of our respective talents, and people took on various roles. And you're going to hear from the editors in a minute. You're going to hear from Christine. And we were able to really not only re-up the momentum, but to put the spirit of Nina's force of nature into the project and never be daunted, even when we had challenges, because we put a lot of pressure on ourselves because we wanted to really have this publication done by the AE conference in honor of Nina. And we were able to do that. And it was a labor of absolute joy, sadness, grief, and hope. And at the end of the day, I know in my heart of hearts that Nina, and this is her U.S. Park Service hat right here, I know that she somehow carries the spirit of this book and of her work and her impact, because she's still a force of nature, and we still carry her torch. Thank you.
Thank you, Sky.
That was a little hard. Nina was my soul sister, y'all. So to share those words, I can't tell you how much I loved her and how much I miss her.
Thank you. Great. We are going to hear from our amazing editors now. These three individuals really gave a lot of their time and energy to make this happen, to make it a professional, really well organized, beautiful piece of work. And so much thanks to Rita, Karen, and Denise. And I'm going to let Rita start.
Well, great afternoon, everybody. It's so wonderful to see you here. Wanted to start a little bit about how I met Nina back at an AEE International Conference in 1988. She was new to AEE, and it did not take her long to share her many gifts with us. And what was amazing is that after 30 years, we really developed a rather intense relationship, because we did do speaking together as well as presenting. And the amazing thing about Nina is that she would always take you aside and have a very intense conversation. And I think the nice thing was that we were both committed to really working on AEE developing more inclusive practices, as well as impacting other institutions and organizations that we belong to. When Sky started talking to me about perhaps being an editor, I was kind of like, oh my God, I'm a little hesitant here, because it's one thing to be an editor of your own work. It's another thing to be an editor of somebody else's vision, and to really put yourself into a situation where there is no sure outcome. It's just a lot of faith and really believing in what the task ahead was going to be. And so, you know, looking at how we started, there was no publisher in the beginning. There was no plan. There was no timeline. There were no authors. And we had 6 months to try to pull this thing all together. And so, the team, I have to say, we were very fortunate in having a supportive AEE board and a tremendous AEE executive director, as well as a project team that came together out of love for Nina, but also commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So we were also fortunate in that the 3 editors that came together have worked together for almost 40 years in furthering this idea. And we tended to work well together, even when we sometimes disagreed. And so I jotted down some notes from my journal about, you know, words that would capture what was going on at a particular point in time, just to give you a feel about what I personally was going through. And here are some of the words that I would jot down periodically. Oh my God, this is so challenging. Risky, humbling, a giant learning curve, and exhilarating all at the same time, while also grieving our loss of our friend Nina Roberts. It's important to note that the field guide is a collection of personal reflection papers and not an academic research document. So in editing, you know, you have to really take into consideration not changing the author's voice as we go through the papers that came in. So in March, I believe, of 2022, we got the number of potential authors together and we put out a call for papers, and we prayed as well as waited humbly for papers to start coming in. And fortunately, in late April and June, they started coming in to our ecstatic wonderment and also appreciation. I think the biggest thing is our driving force was establishing a structure of making progress while at the same time keeping true to Nina and Sky's vision for the field guide. It was written from a variety of, for a variety of readers that could use its contents to further their pursuit of making the world a better and inclusive place. It provides an interactive tool to work on DEIB issues in a more humanistic and, importantly, experiential way. I think we've all been part of PowerPoint presentations that everybody was sleeping in the back of the room after about 5 minutes. This book, you don't sleep. In fact, it immediately engages the reader and calls for their personal responses as they go through, because it allows them to put themselves in another person's shoes. It's wonderful. It's worked well in the boardroom, as well as classrooms, as well as programs in the out of doors. And so following Nina's example, it's our hope that you will share this with your friends and other organizations, board meetings, schools, park districts, organizational camps, forest services, recreation programs, and human services. And I have to say, what an honor it was to be involved.
Thank you, Rita. Denise?
I first connected with Nina in the 1980s when she interned at Woodswoman, where I was the executive director at the time. And it was in the 1980s when Nina launched the first in a series of bibliographies of scholarly articles about women in the outdoors, and most of them by women in the outdoors, one of her huge first services to our community. Nina and I intersected through many arenas, including Take Back the Trails, That was initiated by Nina because Julie and Lolly, two women who had also just interned at Woodswoman later than Nina, were killed. Nina and I stayed close over the years, encouraging each other. I tended to be grounding for Nina, and she happily launched me anytime she could. Every time I heard the word, I heard, D, come over here. I knew it was going to be something fun. So the field guide that we all did is about voices, about 40 voices from so many different identities. We are very appreciative of everyone who offered their voice through the reflection papers, and we hope it's just the start of so many more voices to be heard. We have all of the people involved with the project. A lot of heartfelt work and dedication went into soliciting and editing the stories. As editors, we reached out personally to a lot of people to participate. In order to get people's reflection papers, we were persistent. We didn't want to bother people. You who know me, I'm sort of quiet and don't want to sort of create a bunch of noise, or maybe I do, I don't know. At the same time, with our very short timeline that we had, we knew we had to encourage, nudge, be patient, and appreciate all that we received. And it was bountiful. As editors, we were driven by the question, how can we get the many diverse voices in the book that Nina wanted and we wanted? We didn't want to tick boxes in terms of representation, and we were committed to be sure that the diversity Nina wanted was honored. We don't know all the identities authors identify with, though we do know that the overwhelming majority of the voices in this book are from people with at least one non-dominant identity. And the voices are about both theory and practicality. The voices, as Rita mentioned, were central to our work as editors. Once the papers were submitted, a challenge that we accepted was to help with clarity and readability and not change the person's voice. We wanted authors' voices to shine through clear and authentic. To help with that, each of us read each paper more than once. There was a lead shepherder, and we were just over and over again with that process. Our process was collaborative with authors, spending time on Zoom. Initially, some people talked through ideas, spending time on Zoom, looking at different, potential editing pieces. Times we weren't sure of the meaning in the manuscripts. We went back and forth with authors to make sure we didn't accidentally violate their voice. Even being cognizant about that, there may be places where we have fallen short, and we apologize in advance for that. There was not an obvious ordering to the papers. Rita sorted out the ordering, relying on her feel, intuition, and logic. And Karen and I thought her order worked great. Much appreciation to all the authors who trusted this process and us as editors to take the care to assure that the work represented them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Karen, you're next. And
Unmute.
thank you.
Like Rita and Denise, I met Nina when she first came to AE in the 80s. And I remember thinking when I first met her, I need to learn from this whirlwind of a person. I was so excited that she shared my passion for social justice in the outdoors. So we started on our journey of presenting, writing together, working on projects together, and just sharing ideas. I would always love when Nina's name popped into my inbox. She would always have some article that I needed to read, or a bit of inspiration, or a challenging idea that we needed to discuss, or connect me with a student that she wanted me to meet. And I really enjoyed that, and it stretched us both, I'm sure. While we lived on different coasts, she would make time to visit me when she visited her family on the East Coast, and I always looked forward to those times. But I want to say that Nina's life was an example of stepping forward to make a difference in the world. The editors, we would hear Nina's voice in our ears when we dedicated over 250 hours of edit. I'm sorry, 2,500. That's a lot more than we did. 25 hours of editing in the 6 months to make sure the book got done in time for the AE conference. I want to show you a photo that sums up the dedication that everyone involved in the book. This is just an example of the blood, sweat, and tears that everyone on the project team and the authors did to make this book successful. This is a photo of Denise on the crowded streets of Hanoi in Vietnam, and she's got her computer out and she's working on the book. We were waiting for our banh mi sandwiches to be made after we had done a AE accreditation program in Hanoi, but the book deadline was calling. And so Denise sat on the side of the road and worked on the book. And I use this, and I love this photo because I think it shows the example. We talk a lot about servant leadership, and I think it shows the example of servant leadership that Nina inspired in all of us that were connected with this project. Now, the project team wasn't always in total agreement about what makes sense to be in the book. In fact, some of us had concern about including definitions given the static nature of definitions versus how fluid the terminology changes over time. Social justice terminology has a certain fluidity about it. For example, oftentimes people from oppressed groups wish to be called differently over time, or changes in how they might be wanted to be called changes over time. So in reading the book, I ask people to be mindful that the ideas contained are just a snapshot of one moment. They will change over time. In fact, they have to change as we grapple with the ever more complex challenges that we have to ensure that everyone does belong. The book is designed to be read thoughtfully, but also used bravely. We ask you these questions. How will you use it to invite those difficult conversations about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? How can the stories by the authors in the book be an important educational tool to challenge and support participants? How can this book be a springboard to greater understanding? Can we weave our own stories together with these stories to lift our voices for change? So in conclusion, I'll just say, we ask you to engage with this book as a continuing dialogue about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in your own lives and in the work that you do, the important work that you do in this world. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And thanks again to our editors. They just countless hours and amazing work, and we really appreciate what they've done. And just so you all know, we're going to have a time at the end for some questions or comments if you all want to. So we got a pretty strict timeline with, we got to get a lot of readings in. So it's going to be a great hour, but just so you know, we'll have time for questions at the end. Christine?
Wonderful. Well, thank you all. I have been assigned to give a toast to Dr. Nina, which I love because she always brought the party. I'm drinking a sparkling LaCroix. This is not an ad for, sparkling water, but if you do have a glass, we'll raise a toast here in a second. But I just wanted to say a few words. I am wearing a very special shirt today. What a powerful group of women. This is an old school women's professional group AEE t-shirt that I got years ago. And I wore it because that is how, I know I see some of you in the chat saying, I have that shirt. It's held up very well. And this is where I met Nina. I met Nina as part of the women's professional group. And I immediately felt like I came into contact with a spark. And it was a spark that came from two things. One was relationship. Nina prioritized relationships over just about anything. But the other thing that she prioritized, and if you can keep these two things together, you're a magician like she was, and that was truth telling. So she never sacrificed either. And that just blows my mind, because she always centered the relationship while always needing to say what needed to be said. Nina played a pivotal role in my career. I'm an academic. She helped write my letters for tenure and promotion, and not just any letter, but if you know Nina, if you asked her to do something, she would go above and beyond and did everything with excellence. I also had the opportunity of almost coaching Nina several times with our Activate speaker series. And unfortunately, in 2022, her illness got the best of her and she wasn't able to complete that. And when Nina passed, I said to our Activate team that a library of stories was lost the day that we lost Nina. And yet somehow out of her passing came the birth of all these stories that had been maybe not highlighted or elevated, or a spotlight hadn't been put on some of these stories, because some of these stories are hard to say and require a lot of courage to share. But I think all of us knew that we were being lifted up in our voices to tell the truth, to deepen our relationships with one another by Nina's spirit. And so I always love Audre Lorde's words, and I feel like they really capture so much of what we have done here, because it's all about using stories to break the silence and to remind us that there is so much more that connects us than divides us. Right now, in some of our states across this great country, we are facing laws being passed telling us that conversations about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging will be criminalized. And so this book has a radical narrative right now, and is more relevant than ever, because we can use it to break those silences. Audre Lorde says, "My silences had not protected me. Your silences will not protect you. What are the words you do not yet have? What are the tyrannies you swallow day by day and attempt to make your own, until you will sicken and die of them still in your silence? Ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen to me if I tell this truth? What's the worst that can happen? Then push yourself a little further than you dare. And the speaking will get easier and easier, and you will find you have fallen in love with your own vision, which you may never have realized that you had." And so it's no surprise that when Nina passed, the Parks Conservancy shared this quote. And I'll just end with this, because it was her mission and her passion, and she was able to just speak the truth in love like no one I've ever met. She said, "We park advocates need the passion, commitment, and stewardship of people of color much more than they need our validation. The truth is, people of color love and enjoy outdoor spaces and public lands in ways that are real, yet merely not always understood. And we must continue acting and engaging communities of color like we understand that the fate of our parks and public lands depends on them." Nina's words will echo throughout this land, in our parks and also in our hearts. And so I would love, if you do have a glass or a spiritual glass, raise a glass to me, with me, to a life well lived in service to social justice, relationships, and truth telling. Our dear Dr. Nina. We love and miss her. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you, Christine. We're going to go into our authors reading segments of their papers at this point. And Carolyn Finney is our first author that's going to share with us tonight.
Yes. So just, yes. Hi, everybody. This is so great. I feel like I want to pull the curtain and say, but let me ask you something first. So I understood I have 6 minutes. I can actually get through my thing in 6 minutes and 10 seconds. So I'm going to read the whole thing unless you need me to cut it short.
That's great. Go for it.
Just taking in all the words that you all said, and I'm so thrilled that you invited me to be part of this journey. I really miss Nina, and I love Nina, and I know she's just looking down at us laughing and just having a good time, and said, get on with it. Let's do it. So yeah, let me read my piece, which is entitled A Mirror and a Door. I want to talk about the now and the stories we make and the stories we tell, especially as it relates to all things green. What does it look like to practice ruthlessness in our storytelling? What are the things we still don't, won't, can't say about ourselves, about our country's past, and about our present? And you know what I mean, that legacy of contradictions about who we are as a people on this land at this time. Indigenous removal and this land is your land, slavery and land of the free, home of the brave, the wall along our border with Mexico, and give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses. The list is long. It can get kind of funky when you start to pull back the curtain and really look. And make no mistake about it. The stories we tell and the narratives we perpetuate inform policy, shape public perception, color relationships, and determine direction for all of us and this planet. Simply put, the stories we tell about who we are as a people and who we've been matter. In 1999, I went to graduate school to work on my doctorate in geography. From 1999 until 2003, I didn't talk a lot about where I grew up in New York and how my parents were caretakers for a 12-acre estate belonging to a wealthy white family. Instead, I was initially doing my dissertation on gender and conservation in Nepal. But in every class I took that focused on the environment, which was almost every class I took, I became slightly obsessed by two facts: that I was almost always the only Black person in the room, and that there was rarely, if ever, any readings by or about Black people on any of the syllabi. I thought to myself, where are the Black people at? So that first year of grad school, I decided to write my end of the year paper on making a case for a Black feminist political ecology, in large part because I was trying to find myself and others who look like me in the readings. Where was our agency? Where was our presence? Where was our voice? My advisor egged me on to do this for my dissertation while simultaneously explaining that no one there knew anything about this. So while I would be supported, I would be taking this academic journey on my own. After a series of events outside of my control, 9/11, political unrest in Nepal, I decided to shift the focus of my research to African Americans and the environment in the US. Needless to say, I was a bit overwhelmed. I was putting together a new proposal on something no one seemed to have written about before, and the work suddenly felt so personal. It was at this point that I started looking for African Americans in the environmental literature and was always coming up wanting. I was not able to find anything on the library shelves except the bad things that happened to Black people, like slavery, redlining, health-related effects of poor air quality. How am I supposed to tell a story within an institutional set of expectations, being rigorous in your fact-finding, when our voice is absent? Where were the Black nature stories? What does it mean to be Black and to be green? That's when I had to get creative, and I began looking for our history, our memories, our visions for the future in poetry, art, music, oral history, and memoir. I had to draw outside the lines that were predetermined by a point of view that did not know how to see me and those who look like me. This is also where I began looking at my own story. In an article entitled, "Isn't Black Representation What We Wanted?" by Maura Cheeks in the Paris Review, author Fran Lebowitz asks the question, why does everyone want to see themselves in books? Lebowitz goes on to say that she doesn't understand people who complain about not seeing themselves in books. A book is supposed to be a door, not a mirror, she says. I'm sorry, a book is supposed to be a mirror, she says, not a door. Cheeks, who is African-American, writes, I understand the sentiment, but I disagree with the argument. It's a type of sentiment that can only be felt by someone who was unknowingly represented almost everywhere she turned. She didn't know what she had. In another conversation with Lebowitz, the late African-American writer Toni Morrison says, I am the reader of the books I write. The readers aren't you, Leibowitz pushes, and Morrison laughing replies, yes, they are. I've been thinking about representation in terms of whose stories are centered, who is centered, how we all frame our understanding, and where our bias comes into play. I've been thinking about that when I think about folks like Henry David Thoreau and John Muir, whose voices and experiences have defined a set of practices and memories of who we are as human beings and as Americans in relationship to non-human nature. I've been thinking about how our collective experience in the environment has been defined by individuals who don't look like me and for all their good intentions miss the complexity and their complicity embedded in the assumptions that we all have access to a nature that they've defined in their own image. In 2021, the New York Times asked me to write a piece for their series Black History Continued, where I explored the idea of a Black environmental imaginary. Along with sharing stories of Black folks past and present who have always been on the landscape, I talked about my 5 years backpacking around the world and never seen anyone who looked like me. The editors asked me how these stories had inspired me to begin doing this work. But they didn't understand I was inspired to do this work because I was tired of being relegated to the sidelines of a story that didn't know how to see me. And I knew the stories were out there because I was out there. My decision to include my environmental story in my work helped me to be transparent and situated while revealing my bias, perspective, and history in the shadow of a dominant environmental narrative that rarely considered the experience or presence of anyone who looked like me. Telling my story in relationship to others clarifies where I stand and who I stand with, authentically and honestly. It is a choice I make rigorously and ruthlessly, and it is an invitation for others to do the same. Everyone has a story, and for those of us whose stories have been erased, ignored, and unconsidered, it means we can make the choice to tell our story regardless. There isn't a script for this moment. We get to write it. We get to write what justice is. We aren't simply observers or background actors. I've often heard the statement, change the narrative. Well, we are the narrative. We are the story, which implies accountability, responsibility, and possibility. We can make change one story at a time.
Thank you, Carolyn. Next, we have Sarita Gray.
All right. Hello. So first, before I got into my little excerpt of what I wrote, I wanted to start with how I know Nina. So I have known Nina for quite some time, since I was a little baby. I call her my Auntie Nina, and she has been one of the people who's been a great mentor to me growing up in the experiential education world, which I've also been grateful enough to meet other mentors as well. And also been there for the bigger milestones that have given me a better view, which the title of my written piece is Understanding Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion as a Young Person of Color, which is something I'm still working on. But she's been with me through those milestone moments, one being my first expedition with Outward Bound, another one being Super Camp, a program I did in 2019, I believe, before COVID. And then one she was supposed to meet me with at the end that I just recently got back from, Semester at Sea, where I traveled to 11 different countries. And I can only say that I am so fortunate to have known someone as incredible as Dr. Roberts, who really helped me, and along with this field guide, which I used a lot during that time, because I had expected a different view of my environment and instead was put in an environment where I've never felt more outside in my life. I have never felt more homophobic, racism comments, and the energy as well that I didn't necessarily know what to do with. And so I'm going to talk a little bit now about the book, but then also how that helped me understand that and find, with Dr. Roberts' help and this guide, a way to combat my anger and turning it into a way for me to, okay, how, instead of staying here angry, what can I do about this? How can I teach? How can I figure out a way to find my anger valid, but also find a way to help others understand why it's not okay. So I work for Sonoma County Regional Parks as an open water lifeguard, and this is an excerpt from what I wrote. I'm aware of the ongoing mission to bring more diversity into the outdoors, but I've never been in a situation where I firsthand understanding of this mountain of a challenge. Being a young person of color, I know I need to work harder than others to have my voice heard. Although I love my job, it comes with its challenges. During my first week of staff training, I came up with an idea during an exercise for an issue that we had been struggling with for some time. However, no one listened to me. Then moments later, one of my male coworkers repeated what I had just said louder and got praised for it. I felt unacknowledged. Another key moment that made me rethink my work environment was when I met one of our reserve lifeguards who had a visibly ethnic background. The moment I saw her, I remember fangirling over her as if she were a superhero. She looked like one and had the presence of one and made me feel empowered by reminding me I could be just like her. These incidents are related in the way they both made me feel. The first one made me feel unacknowledged, feeling no one listening to me. And the second experience was uplifting, that made me feel like I could do anything and that I was smart enough to. These experiences empowered me to reach out to my supervisors and express my concern in an email. When we were in our in-service training, there was a lack of diversity awareness and practice of inclusion. I feel it's only important since we represent the county and the public watches us. Our in-service training group of 15 only included 2 people of color. Although I understand there are many different types of ethnicities, identities, and cultures, I feel it is a concern that there is such little diversity representing Sonoma County parks in our staffing lifeguard program. After reaching out, I was able to communicate my concerns and seek help for a solution. The county administration is aware of these statistics and is currently working to integrate new programs that are targeted specifically for POC communities. As for my own efforts, I have been helping with one of our swimming programs, educating Spanish-speaking and low-income communities members in our areas, teaching them about water safety and our available programs and resources. This program is called Vamos a Nadar, and I have thoroughly enjoyed being a part of every session and helping these participants. I would like to credit my motivation and encouragement to Dr. Nina Roberts, who sadly passed away 2 days after this in-service training experience. Knowing someone like Nina for my whole life, I've learned quite a few things. For example, Nina announces her ideas and thoughts to the world fearlessly despite the backlash that might occur, never backing down. She's done so much for the POC communities. Jedi outdoor work is the only made possible by people like her and others who continue to challenge the status quo and fight for those who have been silenced. As I continue my work now, it's people like Nina who remind me of the big impact this type of work has on people's lives. My life will be forever changed growing up around women outdoor educators. With each new experience, I carry these empowering women with me by continuing the work they've done. The outdoors have saved my life more times than I can remember, and these experiences have helped me see each possibility. Even in the outdoors work, there are challenges that are inevitable. Although I know witnessing people who are in this work make decisions for the wrong reasons have left me broken time after time. No person or place will ever be perfect, but our stories are real. In the end, the stories we have lived and shared will be what pushes change for us all. My hope is that we can come together and pay our respects to each other's stories and truths and find ways to protect and share them so they are never forgotten and passed on to future generations. One person can advocate for change. However, with an entire community support, not only change, but also understanding, healing, and better solutions are possible. Now, I also quickly wanted to bring in I was asked by my mother, Sky Gray, to bring in this paper that they both worked on. It's called The Impact of Diversity Issues on Risk Management. And so part of the reason why I wanted to bring both of these in was to talk about the importance of how this work changes and is going to change our future generations. I was able to use this field guide while I was traveling to 11 different countries to create a safe space for minority communities on the ship. in a predominantly white space of privilege. And so my ending for this is how important it is for us to continue this work. Me being a young person and understanding this, and also people like Dr. Roberts who have done so much work. And hopefully we're all hoping that her ripple effect will continue to create great change. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarita. Next, we have Esther Ayers.
Good evening, and thank you for the invite. So I wanted to just share real quickly, and will somebody help me with timing, because I'm going to stay on time, but I just might need a little help if you don't mind.
I got you, Esther.
Thank you. So I wanted to give a little bit of background in terms of me not ever having the opportunity to meet Dr. Roberts, but seeing her writing felt like I knew her, and she really just was a role model for me as I started to kind of like get introduced to literature that was really, I felt like resonated with me. And so much of my work that I looked at, or the way I interpreted it, was Dr. Roberts really kind of advocating for cultural representation. And so my piece is titled A Testimonio of Transformational Justice. And I'm not going to read the entire piece, but what I will do is I would like to offer a certain section and then talk about the ending with this. So basically, just to give you a little bit of content on this Testimonio of Transformational Justice, is I wrote about an experience that I had in 2020 when I submitted a piece to SEER, which is part of AEE, and the learning experience that I did, or that I gained from it. And so one of the subsections of this little excerpt is called Authentic Allies. And I'll start from there, but hoping that folks will go in later and look at it. But so here it says how basically I'm talking about how I relied on folks in AEE to help me get through what I considered something a very difficult situation. I said, also, I relied on my authentic allies, a diverse group of folks who demonstrated unconditional support through the good, bad, and indifferent parts of the incident. In 2018, I was encouraged to attend SEER. During the SEER presentation, I remember not seeing folks that looked like me, a short, dark Latina. Then in 2019, I attended the Therapeutic Adventure Professional Group, TAPG Best Practices Conference, where I saw some of my authentic allies present as keynote speakers. In 2020, I presented as an AEE Activate speaker on Community is at the Heart of What Keeps Us Together, where I shared how mental health impacted my life and identified my passion for adventure therapy. I used a combination of these observations to shape my understanding and perceptions of the importance of allies in belonging. I leaned on suggestions offered by the SEER editors to consult with scholars with similar research interests. Now I continue to grow with brave scholars such as Dr. Roberts. I say brave because scholarship and teaching about historically underrepresented groups are forms of activism that challenge mainstream knowledge. The road of ethnic studies scholarship is lined with roadside graves of dropout, even at the professional level, with suicide and early deaths, with psychological and physical ailments related to frustration, stress, and bouts of defeatism. I relied on my strong social support network to guide me during this time of adversity, including core scholars and practitioners, Dr. Norton, Dr. Tucker, Tony Alvarez, and Gary Stouffer. By collaborating with allies in my academic social network, I obtained access to supportive resources con mi familia, mi comunidad, and my mentors beyond AEE, and sought traditional healings through spirituality, nature, music, and beyond. In consulting with my mentors, I continue to do what we do best as a comunidad. I continue to read and write as part of my healing process. I listen to courageous scholars like Dr. Norton and Dr. Tucker. Ellas me dieron ánimo para seguir adelante. They gave me courage to move forward. I continue to build my research with diverse interdisciplinary scholars within ethnic studies and adventure therapy that focus research on community-based healthcare agencies. I became critical of literature that focused on communities of color only using deficit lenses. Building on BIPOC researchers within the journal, within JEE and AEE, I identified with Dr. Roberts, a brave scholar who inspired me. Her work built on scholars focused on social justice dating back to the 1970s. A few meaningful articles linked with my research shed light on the need for cultural representation. Another piece of work from Dr. Roberts and Spears succinctly placed an emphasis on affirmative efforts that shed light on the historical roles of African Americans, including Lane Colt Jones and Martha Akins, as visionary leaders in the outdoors. Something about Dr. Roberts' work that I aspire to model is to reject dichotomous perspectives. She challenged BIPOC researchers to question our own assumptions so we can reflect on our own biases, while at the same time demonstrating the importance of partnering with interdisciplinary scholarship to dismantle inequities. So I share those pieces, and I'll end with this. I'm going to kind of fast forward on this piece that I was talking about and end with a quote from Dr. Roberts. She says, "The only way we can change the outdoors is by a massive alteration of mindset, including institutions across varying disciplines, from passively non-racist to actively anti-racist. At the end of the day, the sun always sets, and the start of a new dawn sets the sail for either a new beginning or increasing the momentum. Let's follow the sun together and dance. I'm ready to get this party started. Are you? Que descanse en paz, Dr. Roberts."
Thank you, Esther. We have one more reading for you this evening. Sharon Washington. Sharon.
Hi, I'm Sharon. I'd like to first thank the editors for really hanging in there on this project, and to Sherry and everybody at AEE. I will say that it wasn't until yesterday when I was going back through the book that you guys sent that I saw that you individualized the front page. Totally blew me away. Anyway, I want to share my screen for just a moment while I'm talking. And this was in the Grand Canyon, and it was the last big adventure that Nina and I had. I mean, we had other ones, but in terms of, we were in the Grand Canyon in June of 2014. And I remember not wanting to go on this trip because it was all white women and myself. And I said, oh no, we have to have one more spot. And they said, well, we do have one more spot. And I said, yeah. And let's just say, long story short, Nina said, absolutely. She totally wanted to go on that trip. And I decided that people needed to let their money talk about their values, because it wasn't a cheap trip. It was like a 8-day, 9-day trip. And we did a huge portion of it. And we got out of the canyon by helicopter. So that was planned. It was not a rescue. So, but I will say that folks were great, and they ended up pitching in so that I said, we need to have a scholarship for this trip. And I think academics don't make enough money. So thereby we got I got Nina on the river with me because I said, I am not going alone. Okay, and so I will say that I'm going to read an excerpt out of my essay, and it's called Viewed as an Alien, Race-Based Assumptions in the Outdoors. I love being outside in beautiful remote places where the noise of society fades away and the sound of an airplane far overhead stands out as a reminder of civilization. Spending time camping was a way for our family to travel before public accommodations were welcoming to Blacks. My dad nurtured my love for the outdoors, and participating in Girl Scouts provided opportunities for me to learn essential outdoor and leadership skills. Simultaneously, I was learning valuable lessons of self-worth and cultural pride from my family and from the countless Black elders in my life. These lessons over time would forge an internal resiliency strong enough to buffer me from the daily onslaught of systemic racism I encountered throughout my life. These lessons and more helped me navigate the assumptions of white people who questioned my legitimacy in what I refer to as the assumption that I, as a Black person, was an alien in the outdoors. The assumptions by many white people that Black people are not drawn to, comfortable in, knowledgeable about, or have experience in a range of spaces beyond the stereotypes and depictions promulgated in television, movies, advertisements, schools, etc. The constant and ongoing assumption is that I, as a Black woman, is an alien in outdoor spaces. It was 1970, the summer between 4th and 5th grade. My sister and I, who's on right now, were playing in the swimming pool of the apartment complex where we lived when a white man began questioning us as to whether we were guests of someone who lived at the complex. When he learned that we lived at the complex, he then questioned us on how we learned to swim and where we were from, since we didn't speak like any Black people he knew. I remember at the time I thought he was a little stupid for asking us how we learned to swim, since we learned like everyone else, from somebody who knew how to swim. In our case, it was our dad. The questions about where we were from and how we spoke rattled me, since everyone in our family spoke the same way, and we were all from Columbus, Ohio. When we got home, I remember asking my mom why we talked differently from other Black people. Of course, she wanted to know what prompted my questions, but more disturbing as I reflect on the experience is that my nearly 10-year-old self didn't question the white man's knowledge of how Black people speak and how his limited knowledge was likely based on stereotypes with little to no direct experience with Black people. It's familiar and exhausting to be the recipient of white people's projected bias about Black folks. Whether I'm riding a chairlift, resting on the side of a trail, or rafting on a river, I'm questioned about how I got there. I'm not asked, how's the snow? How's my day going? Or anything else about the actual experience. It's though their expectation is that I accidentally found myself in the outdoors. The following experience provides an example of how one might acknowledge the reality of outdoor expertise when a previous assumption was incorrect. In March 2022, I was on a horseback riding excursion in Patagonia with 7 white women from the US. Our 2 white Chilean guides and our head gaucho, who was a mixed race Chilean man. The guides and the head gaucho greeted each other and then welcomed our group to the estancia. We were instructed to put on a pair of chaps to protect our calves, after which the head gaucho looked the group over and assigned us to horses based on his assumptive assessment. I was the last chosen and given the smallest horse. Once the ride began, I realized it differed from the trail rides in the States where horses docilely followed each other and never straying from the line and resistant to cues from riders. Within several minutes, the horse I was riding was responding to weight changes for stopping, starting, and the desired pace. So there was little need to use the reins. Approximately a third of the way into the ride, the head gaucho stopped and motioned for one of the women to get off her horse. He then turned to me and indicated that I should get off the horse I was riding. And the guide translated that the gaucho didn't think she could ride the horse that she was, but I could do better. If that moment had been a cartoon, it would have been funny to see a large timer counting down in the upper corner of the screen while the guide was figuring out what to say next. 5, 4, 3, 2. Hey, Sharon, how did you learn to ride? How long have you been riding? And blah, blah, blah. The questions themselves are loaded with assumptions regarding what white people think Black people can and cannot do, followed by then asking the Black person to legitimize how they gained a particular skill, as though it was gotten illegally. Proving that I belong in the outdoors or any setting where I don't live down to a white person's expectations or assumptions of me is exhausting. This is why at the end of the ride, after I had dismounted and taken off my chaps, the head gaucho looked me in the eye and said, "Eres muy bien, teniente." You're a very good rider. What a relief to be acknowledged without question.
Thank you, Sharon.
Sure.
Thanks, everyone, for staying with us. I want to open up the floor to anybody who has questions or comments or any appreciations for the authors. If anybody has anything, you can drop it in the chat, or you can just come off mute and ask.